many megatons of emissions were directly reduced from the carbon tax in 2023?
Well, we don't, the numbers for, John will correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have the numbers yet for 2023. We're still compiling those. It takes about 2 years, and that's the case for most nations to compile their inventory report.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. Hey gang, what's up? We all recognize Stephen Guilbeault. He's the Liberal Minister of the Environment, the carbon tax guy, the CN Tower climber. He's an absolute animal, and he's here in committee, not giving straight answers, whether he's able to or not. Let's take a look. He's being grilled by a couple of Conservative MPs here. These committee meetings are always interesting. What is this carbon tax worth to Canadians? Worth a little rebate check, I guess. Let's take a peek at what was going down in committee. These are always wild, guys. Check this one out.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. Minister, how many megatons of emissions have been directly reduced from your carbon tax since it was introduced? Just a number.
I can give you the numbers. I have the table here. Just a second. Thank you, John. So you mean not by 2030, but so far
Directly reduced from the carbon tax.
I know I have it here. Okay. Megatons, 2018, 5 megatons, 2019, 14 megatons, 2020, 17 megatons, 2021, 18 megatons, 2022, 19 megatons, and 2023, 24 megatons.
So I'm kind of confused, Minister, because out of an order paper question in January, you said the government does not measure the annual amount of emissions that are directly reduced by carbon tax.
I don't have that in front of me, but I believe the question was about tracking individual ministers' movement or individuals in the country, which is not something we do.
It was not. It was directly what was directly reduced by the carbon tax. So what numbers did you give us there just now?
I don't have that question or answer in front of me, but we published
an annual
national.
Give me some numbers. Where did those numbers come from?
National Inventory Report, which is published annually. It's something we submit to the United Nations. It's a public document.
So they're not the numbers directly from the carbon tax, emissions reduced from the carbon tax. They're numbers that are combined with a bunch of other stuff.
No, the numbers that I gave you are specifically related to carbon pricing. Maybe Associate Deputy Minister Lawrence Hanson would like to add something to that.
Thanks. It's partly just making sure you draw the distinction between National Inventory Report numbers, which talk about the amount of emissions in any given year, and versus the projections we do for future years on the basis of the model. And as the minister has indicated, there had been a previous question where we talked about how to attribute individual transportation as something for an emissions reduction, but we can, using our model, determine the extent to which emission projection reduction.
Excuse me, sir. Here I'm asking the minister. So those numbers you gave me, I guess you can forward them to us. They were from the carbon tax. They were the emissions directly reduced from the carbon tax. Yes or no?
The Supreme Court.
Yes or no?
The Supreme Court made it very clear.
Yes or no? I'm asking you a direct question.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Wait a minute. Trying real hard to answer.
I'm curious about the answer as well. So we have to be careful that we don't all speak at the same time because it's not good for the interpreters. And the minister, no witness is obliged to answer yes or no. You can ask for a yes or no answer. But I think this is an important question, and I think it deserves a more complete answer. But so could you go ahead and answer that question? I think your question was, Mr. Mazur, the numbers that the minister cited, you want to know if they're attributable to the price on carbon. That's your question.
Directly, the emissions directly reduced by carbon tax.
Okay, so we'll let the minister address that. Yeah.
Absolutely, Mr. President. So number one, the Supreme Court of Canada in its court case on carbon pricing was very clear that the system we put in place is not a tax.
Point of order. He's not answering the question, and I have another question.
I am. If you're allowed, give me 30 seconds. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for 30 seconds to something as complex as carbon pricing. So the numbers that I quoted earlier are emission reduction from carbon pricing. We will be happy to communicate those to the committee.
the answer. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mason.
How many megatons of emissions were directly reduced from the carbon tax in 2023?
Well, we don't, the numbers for, John will correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have the numbers yet for 2023. We're still compiling those. It takes about 2 years, and that's the case for most nations to compile their inventory report. So the inventory report that was put out this year in 2024 was for 2022. The one we will put out next year will be for 2023. We anticipate that obviously could change, but we anticipate that it will be about 24 megatons next year. I mean, we'll have the report next year, but it'll be 2023 numbers.
Has your government decided whether or not it will increase the carbon tax over $170 a ton past 2030? Yes or no?
The beginning of your question. I'm sorry.
Has your government decided whether they will increase the carbon tax over $170 a ton past 2030? Yes or no?
There's been, as the chair of the committee said earlier, I'm not obliged to answer yes or no to those questions. There's been no such determination made at this point.
You're not obliged, but I think you have a moral duty to answer Canadians.
I have an obligation
But he
to
said
answer. That's exactly what I'm doing. I
there's been
think
no
those
decision. There's been no decision.
an issue and as significant to Canadians as climate change deserve better than a yes and no answer. I guess that's my point.
Yes, they absolutely do. If you're going to go beyond quadrupling the carbon tax, absolutely. Any indication? Do you think you might?
And I'll remind you that it's not a carbon tax. It's a pricing system on carbon.
So the way it's going, do you think it might, or it might not?
I think it's the third time. I'm happy to repeat it again. It's your time, sir. We haven't had any conversations about that.
The Environment Commissioner revealed that your government gave away billions of dollars through their $8 billion net zero accelerator fund without knowing any of the emissions would be reduced. Were you aware of this?
I unfortunately don't have the Environment Commissioner's report in front of me. I was under the impression we were talking about carbon pricing, but I'd be happy to provide a response in writing to this question.
Talking about carbon pricing, talking about a model that was actually potentially going to reduce emissions. And you were having the government we were asking the government whether to prove it or not. So the net accelerator fund was actually from the commissioner's report, and I'll read it. The majority of the net zero accelerator contribution agreements do not have commitment for emissions reductions. Were you aware of that?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this accelerator is under the responsibility of the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. I'm sure they would be happy to provide answer to your question. Again, it's not a question pertaining to carbon pricing.
Does that concern you at all? That the commissioner found this?
Again,
Does it at all?
Mr. Chair, I think
Any concern at all?
I gave an extra minute because of all the back and forth there and interruption. So, but we have to go now to Madame Chatel.
Too often.
Merci.
Mr. Deltel, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Minister. It's always nice to see you here in the committee. So we all agree that climate change is real and that we need to take action to reduce pollution. Now, we have a different vision than you do. In response to my colleagues' questions, you provided a number of figures. You talked about what figures related to carbon prices, and you were talking about the National Inventory Report. Is that correct? Those figures? Yes, the data that I gave you are based on analyses. There's information that's in the National Inventory Report, and it's also based on the department's analyses. Are those done? Is that data projections, or is it real quantifiable data that we can attribute to carbon pricing? Well, as you know, we use modeling. So it's projections. It's projections for the future years. So when we say 78 million megatons by 2028, that's based on models. And these are models that are being done by other. So you calibrated exactly the proportion and of carbon pricing. Well, it's not a tax, but yes, it's an analysis that's done by the department, that's done by other organizations to evaluating the impact of carbon pricing on emissions. Okay, well, I don't understand. You're here telling us that you are not able to quantify the exact impact of carbon pricing, but in this letter that you yourself signed, it's dated January 24th, it clearly says that the government does not measure the evaluation of the reduction of emissions that are directly related to carbon pricing, the federal carbon pricing system. So what is true? Is what you're telling me true, or is it what this letter tells me? Is that what's true? Well, as I said, the National Inventory Report is a public document that's published every year as part of our obligations under Now, the response that you're referring to dealt with a question, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was talking about measuring the impact of carbon pricing on individual travel.
The annual amount of emissions that are directly reduced from federal carbon pricing. Il n'y a pas question de déplacement, là.
There's no mention of travel here. Well, you're commenting on a document that I don't have before me. I have lots of information here to share with you. I don't know it all by heart, but so I have to refer to those documents or to the colleagues from the department and other departments that are from time to time. But what I can tell you is that I provided you with figures today, dated May 21st, that give an explanation that's based on the inventory and on an analysis conducted by our department of the impact of carbon pricing on our emissions targets. Well, it contradicts what you wrote yourself in January. So, I mean, you can present a list of figures, but you're able to provide them now. You weren't able to provide them before. Well, I provided you 5 of them from 2018 to 2022, and we did projections as well for 2023 to 2030. I have, listen, we're both Quebecers. We know that Quebec has a different system, and you know, as I do, that you have the power to impose carbon pricing in Quebec. Are you going to do it? If so, when and how much? We have an agreement with the Quebec government. The Quebec system continues to apply as other provinces have done. Okay, so it's equivalent, but your aim is to quadruple the pricing on carbon. So if ever there was no longer equivalency between the two systems, when are you going to be imposing your rates in Quebec, and by how much? I have no intentions of imposing rates on Quebec. Now, Quebec system is not based on price, it's based on emissions reductions. It's a carbon-based system, yes, but that's a cap and change or cap and exchange program. And the price in Quebec is very different than it is elsewhere. And people that are just comparing the prices, they miss a lot of the complexity of the system.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. What do you think, gang? Point of order, Mr. Chair. What is going on in these committee meetings? We do get the best of the best. Larry Brock, Garnet Genu, Rick Perkins, Michael Chong, Michael Cooper, Shannon Stubbs, Michael Barrett, with Stephanie Kusi. The list goes on and on. They're always super interesting. Something else that's super interesting is the live show that we cover. We cover every question period daily broadcast. It's fun. Come join the community. It's a fun chat room if you like that kind of thing. We keep it clean, but we're learning about Canadian federal politics, and we'll continue with that and these series of videos about the committee meetings. So like, subscribe, get notified, share, all that fun stuff. Check out one of the other videos floating around here. We'll catch you next video. Thank you very much for watching this one. Also, check out our live broadcast. It's really fun. Like, subscribe, get notified, and share. All those fun things. We'll catch you next video. Thanks for watching.